Well, this is Matt from Working Fintech, and welcome to another episode of interviews with leaders in Fintech and Web3. And today we're delighted to be joined by Elina Pedersen, who's the co-founder and chief revenue officer of Your Bourse. Welcome.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you for having me.
And so I guess let's jump straight into the area that you live and breathe in around kind of trading and retail trading. There's over the last decades or so, there's been a big rise in people trading themselves, spread bettors and FX platforms, and more recently crypto platforms. Can you just talk about what is retail trading and how you see that market?
Yes, sure. So I guess if we go back to the definition, right? Retail trading is anything that has to do with speculative trading, right? So it's trading for someone's personal gain and not necessarily for the gain of an institution. So if it's, an institution, then you would have different tools, you would have several people in the analytical department, you potentially have some software development. I think it's a bit less in the retail trading. A lot of it is just by, a click of a button. But also I can see that there is more and more sophisticated retail traders. And another important thing is that it's not really an investment as often people would perceive that it's an investment, but actually it's almost a full-time job, if I'm honest.
Yeah. So very speculative. If someone's getting involved as an individual. So you've been in this industry for a while, and in the previous company to before Your Bourse, you were at Admiral Markets, where it looked like from an outlooker kind of looking in, looks like you rose from working in marketing all the way up to the top as CEO in a very short amount of time. Can you talk us through that journey?
Yes, of course. I was young. I was really young when I joined Admirals, and it was a growing company. And when I joined, it was 33 people, if I'm not mistaken. And when I assumed more of a CEO role, we were 350. The interesting part of Admirals was that we really strived to have a local office in any country possible. So we had to deal with a lot of localization in terms of marketing, in terms of sales process. It was really, really kind of like a local company where we really had to manage, we work with different cultures. I think, in terms of the growth or the rapid growth, I'd like to think that part of it was, of course, the growth of the company. But at the same time, I guess it was the attitude that I approached the company with, because I always had a can-do attitude. Whenever there was a challenge, I would jump on it. And in a sense, I was really fortunate because I worked directly with the UBOs, Alexander Tukilov and Petri Lausch, and they were incredibly encouraging. They were really supportive. And in general, the culture in the company was that if you think you can do it, we will support you as much as you can. We will give you not necessarily all the resources, because sometimes the resources are not available. But if you have an idea that we think could drive us forward, we will do our best to provide those resources, or let's do it with the minimum resources, but let's try it out. And I think that really, really fit well with me as a person and the growth of the company.
So why did you leave?
I didn't, I didn't quite, I can't say I left. I became a non-executive director at some point, and the owners are still really, really good friends of mine. And I don't know if I can disclose it. We work with Admirals a lot in Your Bourse. But yeah, I just had this urge, we saw, I think we will maybe speak about it, but I saw a gap in the industry, and my husband is from the same industry. So we saw that gap and we were really eager to fill it. So that was the main reason. It wasn't anything to do with the company.
And so is that how Your Bourse got started? Like, you identified a problem when you were working in the industry, and And what was the motivation then for going, head first, kind of straight into it?
So back in the day, the way the financial industry worked, or at least retail brokerages, they didn't have the access to the technology that, let's say, banks would have. And banks would really often rely on the internal technologies. So the brokers, especially the ones who wanted to operate in a more sophisticated matter, in more of like a proper financial institution, they had to develop something internally. And of course, when you develop something new, there are a lot of teething problems. And we had that at Admirals, my husband had that in his company. And you learn by developing a product. But by the time you've developed it, it becomes a legacy technology. And if it is a legacy technology, it's not very scalable. Like you can't package it, you can't share it with others. So I guess there was enough knowledge that we both had that we wanted to share with the industry, and just to make sure that everybody can benefit, and ultimately actually that the end trader would benefit as well, because this would allow the brokers to provide better trading conditions, safer business, and just a better trading environment, really.
So Your Bourse today, what exactly does it do?
So in a very simplistic way, we connect different brokerages to execution venues, but we also allow them to run their own risk books. We connect different trading platforms to, again, the matching engine, the execution engine. That's our core product. We allow them to actually, if you think about it, it's like a backbone of a broker. So whenever the client sees the front end, the trading platform, that's the client experience. But in order to be able to provide that, there needs to be something fast and agile on the back end, because the order, when the client clicks a button, it has to go somewhere. Something has to happen. It has to be booked in the correct place. And if we think about it, it's actually, when I think about it, our brain perception and response time is 13 milliseconds. If you think about it, like, I don't know if you get hit or not, it's just the perception time. The actual response time for you to move or do something is 250 milliseconds. Now, our system operates in 20 microseconds, and we're improving it currently to 120 nanoseconds. So, there has to be scalability in what we do. And we are incredibly good at ultra low latency. We have several patents. So yeah, that's I guess a simplistic way of putting it.
And is that deployed on the cloud, or is that deployed locally at the customer?
Well, and this is a really interesting question, because you will find that it's a bit of a holy war. What do you do? How do you do it? We are all about bare metal, because we think that we can optimize best when you're sitting in a financial data center. We can cross-connect to the liquidity providers, to banks. We can fine-tune the hardware as well, where when it's in the cloud, yes, there's certain benefits of quickly scaling up, for example, but you will see that, unfortunately, it hasn't been implemented so far in the financial industry as much as you would expect it to. And I think unless someone like Equinix decides to go into that cloud space, we might still have to wait for it a bit longer.
Can you elaborate a little bit on this world of colos and data centers and bare metal and low latency? Because for some of the listeners of the show, they might not be familiar with that. Actually the nuts and bolts of how that works. Could you just explain it?
Well, I'll try. I guess, okay, so the first things first, it's one thing when someone clicks a button. And if we look at institutional trading environment, right, let's put HFT, high frequency traders, aside, or high frequency trading funds aside. If we look at just general trading environment for institutional needs, such as, offsetting certain risks, it's a matter of a click. The price very often is not as important because it's more of a hedging strategy. And in that case, what you will find then, latency is not as important. And maybe even the frequency of transactions is not as high as when, for example, you're looking at retail traders, because there are brokers that have, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of traders trading at the same time. And when that happens, and they all trade at the same time, and some of them use algos, and those orders have to go into the system, you have to make sure that they're executed well in a central venue, or there has to be a way to book those trades correctly. So it becomes very intensive operation to run. And that's why we've actually been successful, because we are in our space, we're the fastest on the market and we're the most scalable. So I don't know if any numbers matter, we can process 500,000 trade events per second on one CPU. And this is fully scalable. So yeah, so when you move into retail, the capacity becomes important.
And what kind of trends do you see for technology in kind of what you're doing in your realm? Is it very much about speed, robustness, and scalability, and always improving that, or is there some other bigger technologies kind of on the horizon that might completely kind of change the landscape?
I think in terms of technology, we would be the one who is disrupting the industry right now, I would say, because we actually bring some ideas from the institutional space into retail space, such as having a matching engine, in a central order book. But at the same time, and I spoke with our developers as well before I got on this podcast, and I said, look, what do you see in your space? And they say that AIs do really simplify their work. Like it won't be, and actually, I guess that's another interesting subject that maybe comes up a lot. Like, will AIs replace developers, for example? I don't think that this is possible in our space, because the optimizations that we have to do, they involve a lot of intellectual property, because it's just, it's not out there. You won't be able to just put it in the AI and it produces a code, But there are certain things where, in terms of their work, they can use AIs to help, I don't know, write release notes or things like that. So they say that it simplifies their work. If we look at retail trading industry, then I would say that there are more and more brokers out there who create their own trading interfaces, because they see that as their IP, and they really try to make it as user-friendly, as intuitive as possible. And I guess that came from all the neo-banking kind of background. But if we look at the business models, that's something, again, very interesting, because our industry used to be very different 15 years ago. And if you'll speak to someone in the financial industry, they will definitely say, there was an S&P event that happened in 2015, which affected a lot of financial companies. And, it also affected the regulations a lot. So the retail trading industry became a lot more scrutinized. So you would see some brokers moving offshore to out of that regulatory umbrella. And the most recent development in that movement is what would be called prop trading. It's not real asset management or fund management. It's more of, it's brokerage companies that position themselves as educators. And what they say is that we will give you a trading challenge. So ultimately, they call it a challenge. You go on the website and you can buy a challenge for, I don't know, there are different types of challenges, but I don't know, £200. So you buy this challenge for £200 and they impose conditions on you. Like, there's going to be this much leverage. Your maximum drawdown can be this much. So they kind of tell you how you should be trading. Now, if you pass that challenge, you get into a next stage and next stage. And the final stage of the challenges is then funding your trading account. So they would go, oh, Matt, here is £250,000. You still have the same limitations as on your challenge account, but now you are becoming a prop trader. So you're trading with our money and we will pay you a share of profits. So it's actually a really popular concept. It's not just you going and opening an account and, passing through the KYC and depositing your own money. It's kind of like it's under the educational umbrella because you're actually funding an educational environment, a simulation of real environment. And it really revived the industry in a way, but the regulators are now looking into it. So I don't know which way it's going to go, but it definitely created a lot of news.
I was a prop trader 20 years ago. I used to trade futures.
So maybe you should actually know. Some of them do offer futures as well. So maybe you should try that.
Yeah. The industry kind of started 20 odd years ago. There was a lot of FX trading, and then kind of starting to add in other types of asset classes like trading stocks and CFDs and so on. And then more recently, there's obviously been lots of crypto trading in the last 10 years, and then things like altcoins and so on in the last few years. What do you see as the trends for different types of instruments and asset classes that people are trading in retail trading?
It's still predominantly, it's going to sound funny, but it's still predominantly gold and gold futures, for example. And I guess when I say it's an easy one to trade, it's a lot more predictable. But it's a challenging one for the brokers because it's really hard to hedge that position out in the market, especially with brokers offering more artificial trading conditions. So if you look again at the retail trading industry versus the institutional trading industry, what you will find is that you'll find all sorts of artificial conditions like zero spreads and this and that and leverage 1 to 500 and things like that, which doesn't exist at all on the institutional stage, right? So when that happens, then of course they need to be a bit more sophisticated and how they find a way to hedge that position out. And because gold is really predictable, there is volatility wise, again, it doesn't work towards the broker's advantage. It becomes incredibly challenging. But the most of the volumes we see is in gold, certain indices, such as FTSE, and just the standard currency pairs.
In this industry is particularly on the broker side, it's very competitive. But it sounds like you're essentially providing the technology to the brokers. Is there many competitors against your company, or typically people trying to build this stuff themselves?
I think no, the competition, I would say, is quite rough in our industry, predominantly because unfortunately, the brokers learn about the technology or whatever they need to have in their technology often too late. And it's a knowledge intensive industry. So when you speak to dealers or even sometimes founders, you will find brokers being founded by traders, and they understand how trading works, but they don't necessarily understand how the risk management works. So a lot of them do fail, unfortunately. And that's why, there are different types of companies out there. Some of them perhaps are not able to provide the benefits that we provide or some other market leaders provide, but they're able to provide a cheaper price but very limited functionality. And as in the beginning, perhaps they haven't learned what they will need in the future, or they haven't acquired that knowledge yet, they would go for that kind of offering. So I find this, I guess, one of the most challenging things is actually educating startup brokers. When you're speaking with someone who's been in the industry for a longer while, then that becomes easier. But then very often they would also have understanding of what kind of tools they need. And they might be looking into very sophisticated integrations or very sophisticated algorithms, which again, we are able to support, but it is quite a competitive industry to be in.
In your previous company, you said when you were at Admirals, you were talking about this very kind of open culture where people can try things and they get the backing for it, and you get that kind of culture is very much fostered. How have you created a culture, and what's your kind of approaches to leadership in your current role? Because you're co-founder, co-CEO, and chief revenue officer. So
Yeah,
how
but
do you kind of approach that in your bourse?
I think it's a bit of a humbling question, isn't it? For me personally, transparency is very important, and feedback is really important. And when I say feedback and transparency, I don't only mean that I would go to my team and I would tell them everything I think. No, not necessarily that. Two-way street. So I find it that as a leader, I expect as much input from my team members as much as I give them. It's often, I think, in the beginning of this leadership journey, and even specifically back at Admirals, I often befriended people to the point where sometimes I felt that maybe the targets are not quite met, or it would affect my perception of where we are going. I think I do a lot less of that at the moment. And, if there is a blocker, I need to know about it. And because we're all working towards a goal. And if there is a blocker, it doesn't matter if it's a personal blocker, if it's a work-related blocker, I want to know about it. And I want to help the person to, unblock the path. So I think as a leader, I feel like right now it's a lot about being very soft, but I'm definitely not a soft leader, if that makes sense. I'm the one who would want to have a difficult conversation.
And how have you coped in an industry that is predominantly male? Financial markets, trading, financial services is a very male-heavy industry. How have you found that journey? And I suppose what skills and tools in your armory have you brought into that someone who's a male leader might not have?
Uh, I do think that the more male dominated the industry is, the more testosterone there is in the room, the more they need females kind of to, glue it together and make sure that it doesn't fall apart in a way. Actually my journey, I was thinking about it quite recently, and I've been thinking about males in my life in a way that affected my career. And, I had most bizarre stories, but at the same time, I had also most inspiring males and leaders in the financial industry. If I think, like I've mentioned Alexander and Dimitri, but if I think back to my mentors, one of the first mentors I had was, again, he was male, and he just saw the talent in me, and he didn't mind that I was female or that I was young, or, I was like trainee. He didn't mind that. He really took it, and he really helped me build that confidence. And he really helped me because I would, in the beginning, I remember I would sometimes kind of shy away, but he built the confidence for me to be able to say, oh, actually, you know what? Wait a minute. I have something to say, and I really want you to hear me out. And that's thanks to those people that surrounded me. But of course, I had like bizarre situations when someone would expect me to bring them coffee because, they thought I am an office manager, but actually they booked a meeting with me. So, it's been a very interesting journey, definitely. And yeah, I'm glad to be a part of that industry.
It sounds like you had some great bosses and mentors along the way. So I suppose going back, if you were to start the journey again and you were 18, starting out your career or thinking about what you were doing, would you do anything differently?
I don't know. I don't think so. There was a period of my life when I looked at it and I thought, am I on the right path? Is this what I really want to be doing? There are people who are curing cancer, and there are people who are colonizing Mars. Maybe I want to be doing that. Actually, when I look back at it, I was very, we have different goals. And when I was younger, I can definitely say that one of my goals was generating wealth. Because I was born in Estonia, still during the Soviet Union times, and when everybody was made equal. So for me, it was a part of my DNA that I wanted to grow. For me, that wealth was the confirmation of the fact that I'm on the way, So I don't think I would have been able to achieve it in any other industry. Now, at the same time, as our values change, I've realized that it's not about the industry. I realized that it's more about who we are, and we can make a difference in any industry and we can still be true to our values. So no, I wouldn't have changed anything because it made me who I am right now.
And what would you say about for people kind of starting their careers, about getting into fintech as a sector?
Okay.
Like financial technology is obviously is a rapidly growing area, and there's lots of different facets of it as well, lots of different types of areas of fintech. What would you say to kind of people looking to get into your side of fintech?
I think, and I guess it goes back to the values. I think it's really important that your personal values are aligned in a way with your work. Because for me personally, it's kindness and courage. And when I say courage, it means doing the right thing no matter what, right? And I can be doing that in my job 15 times a day, right? It can be small, it can be large. It's just having the courage to do the right thing. Now, and this has all, and this is going back to this period of life. And I thought, oh, maybe this is not what I want to be doing. Maybe I want to volunteer and go and work at NHS full time or something like that. So, but no, I realized that we can do it in our work, and we just need to understand what we stand for, because very often, and this was my confusion in the beginning as well, and I see it more and more, and I see a lot of friends struggling with it very often, especially, I don't know if it's a trend, people seem to separate their work from their life, and they say, this is work-life balance. I work from 9 to 6 and this is all I do, and that's why I feel good, right? So I feel this is the most destructive thing one can do to themselves, because if you separate your work from your life, you're taking out a massive part of your life and you're not enjoying it. So as long as you can entangle your values in your work, you can truly make it your life's work. And I feel this is the only way we can be happy.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. I've got a final question for you is, you're working in a technology company, and from what I understand, you're not a developer, you're not a coder. Can you just talk about the opportunity of other job roles in a fintech company outside of just coding? Because I think people have a misconception that you need to be a developer to kind of get into this industry, where there's lots and lots of developers who work in these companies, but there's also lots and lots of other job roles. Can you just talk about kind of all the opportunity in your company and in the sector as well?
Oh, yes, of course, most certainly. Well, anything that is commercial or that is human facing, because as much as we need developers, we always still work with humans, right? And it's very often about, again, personal values and being the right person for the role. It's a lot about empathy. So we work in the industry where a lot of money is involved in trading, right? And for some people, it's a very, very touching subject, which is understandable. So a lot of it is providing that human-like support. So there would be customer support representatives, there would be sales director, sales business development managers. There is a lot of marketing related roles, a lot of community management roles. So we do quite a lot of community management because the dealers themselves are quite fragmented. So in the brokerage, you would have a dealing department, a risk management department, and it's a know-how of the company. So very often it would be guarded. And because it's so guarded, people do not share and they don't have a platform for sharing. So what we do at Your Bourse, for example, we do a lot of knowledge sharing. So, and we get a lot of people involved in that from marketing background or PR background or even like writing background. We have some people with like even, degree in English, for example. And it's a lot about community management. It's a lot about events. It's a lot about speaking about the difficult subjects, it's speaking about the trends. So I think there is so much more to any fintech company than just coding and even QA. So you would, I think a very good QA would be someone who clicked the platform before a lot and understands, the whole chain of events, but the person doesn't necessarily need to have technical knowledge.
And how can people get in contact with you or follow what you're doing?
I'm very, 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 very approachable. My LinkedIn, Elina Pedersen, feel free to message me. It's actually my personal goal to try to respond to as many LinkedIn messages as possible. So even if it's someone approaching me to sell something, I never ignore it. I would say, oh, sorry. I would actually spend a minute to look at it because I think sometimes they're great ideas. So LinkedIn is probably the easiest way. But of course, my email, it's super simple, elina@yourbourse.com. And yeah, any possible method is fine.
Elina, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Matt. It's been a pleasure.